Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker is not only the final chapter of the sequel trilogy, but the end of the Skywalker saga. After this, Lucasfilm and Disney are going to go off in new original directions like they're doing with the Mandalorian TV show. Hopefully, the Rian Johnson trilogy is still happening, maybe? But in this film, the Resistance is after something very important to their cause, and the mission after this thing is led by Rey, Finn, and Poe, the usual suspects. But of course, Kylo Ren, wanting to prevent them from finding this thing, is closely on their tail leading the First Order, and Emperor Palpatine is also involved in what's going on. Before seeing this film, I thought it would just make sense if I did a rewatch marathon of every single theatrically released Star Wars film before seeing The Rise of Skywalker, and I was very surprised to see kind of where I stood with all of those movies. My least favorite prequel is now The Phantom Menace. I was very surprised by that because it used to be Attack of the Clones, but when I rewatched that one, I was surprised that I found more things in that I liked compared to the dull mess that was The Phantom Menace. I still stand by that Rogue One is the best prequel film that we have, but then again, that A- grade in my original review doesn't really hold up all that well anymore. It's like a C+ now, but I do think it's better than the entire prequel trilogy just by a little bit. Unsurprisingly, I think to all of you, Solo didn't really hold up all that well. I think you could even tell in my review that I wasn't too fond of it, even though I did give it a B-. Now it's at a straight down the middle C. When it comes to my rewatch of the sequel trilogy though, The Force Awakens, it's not my favorite movie of 2015 anymore. My A+ grade has been lowered to like an A-, but that's still great. I still had a fun time with that movie. I still thought they did a good job with that. The Last Jedi was interesting, because when I first saw that, I was one of the people that was like, I don't understand why people are hating on it so much. I don't get the audience score being so low. I think they're just mad because they messed with fan theories and they just subverted expectations and people don't like original things. Upon rewatching it 2 times, my thoughts on it have kind of lowered a bit, and just thinking, you know what, I appreciate Rian Johnson a lot, obviously. The poster for Knives Out is there, which I adore that film, and I've also adored Looper and Brick. But unfortunately, it just feels like there's a lot of elements in the story that just don't really support the main arcs that these characters are going through, but I like the arcs that they're going on. It's just the thing supporting it just doesn't hold up. The Rey, Kylo Ren, and Luke storyline is aces though. So unfortunately, The Last Jedi didn't really hold up all that well, and my grade is also kind of lowered to a C+. But if I had to rank every film that I've given a C+ to, this would be like my highest, because there's just a lot of great things about it, but unfortunately it does have its issues that bog it down from being the great film that it is for me. I still respect the movie a lot though, and I don't get the over-the-top hate for it. With that all being said, I was going into this film only with some reservations because of Emperor Palpatine's involvement. I didn't really know how to feel about that with its announcement, but honestly I was on board with it because J.J. Abrams, I really respect him a lot as a filmmaker, as a producer. I think he's a really talented dude, and I thought if anyone can replace Colin Trevorrow, because he was supposed to direct this movie, but he dropped out or was fired, one of those two. If anyone can come in and make something good out of this finale, it could be J.J. Abrams, and he's talked about how much he loved The Last Jedi and that he's not going to ruin anything in that one, so I was thinking, okay, he's going to pay respect. He's not going to just cater to fans and just give them fan service. He's just going to make a good finale. So, what did I think of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker walking out of it? Well, I thought it was a fan-servicey, disappointing, mediocre disaster. That completely retconned a lot of points of The Last Jedi, despite J.J. Abrams saying that he respected that movie a lot, just not enough to follow it up logically or in a way that was satisfying. I want to remind you guys that out of the newer Star Wars films that have come out, the Star Wars films that I've reviewed on this channel, Force Awakens, Rogue One, Last Jedi, and even Solo, I've walked out of those films in the theaters and made reviews saying very positive things. Even Solo, even though that was a B-, that was still me walking out going, it was decent, and although my thoughts have changed on it since, I still walked out of the theater initially thinking, hey, good movies. This is the first new Star Wars film where I've walked out just so emotionally touched a bit, but also disappointingly frustrated. A lot of people have been walking out saying, I don't know how to feel about it, I have to go see it again. But for me, I just walked out going, you know what, I know exactly where I'm at with this. And I know exactly how I'm going to phrase this entire review, so let's get right on into it. I'm just going to mention, I think, the biggest flaw that I have with this, Emperor Palpatine's involvement. It was my big reservation beforehand, but I was thinking, okay, maybe it's like a Force Ghost thing. Maybe they're going to do something really unique and clever and have like the final act with Rey and Kylo Ren, maybe a bit more of an internal conflict with this Force Ghost Palpatine. I can't really say what they do because some people will probably shout spoilers even though they reveal what it is, like, not even 5 minutes into the movie, but I hated it. I hated what they did with him, and how he later affected the plot, especially how the third act big battle goes. I especially hated that despite Kylo Ren and Rey having a strong enough storyline, that eventually he had to get involved, and it undercut exactly what they were going for. Because the Kylo Ren and Rey storyline in this movie, it is a bit of a retcon of what The Last Jedi was kind of setting up, that Kylo Ren was not going to be this redeemable figure, that he was just going to lead the First Order and create something new out of it. He wasn't going to try to be the new Emperor or try to bring back the Jedi. He was just going to bring everything down and make something new, and that's why I wanted Rey to join him. I was very much so looking forward to seeing like a very monstrous Kylo Ren just going completely unleashed. And also Rey, I like the idea that she was a nobody, that she wasn't related to anyone special, she didn't need anyone special to be special, she could just be special on her own, or a nobody in this case. So in this movie, when you analyze their story arcs a bit, though it is a bit of a step back of what Rian Johnson I think was clearly going for, it's still something that could narratively work, almost, but the thing that undercuts it ultimately is the Emperor. The fact that Palpatine is in this movie, and the stuff they reveal about it. The stuff that they reveal so quickly into the movie. Like I said, it's not even 2 minutes in where you find out how Palpatine is actually interacting in this movie. The title crawl just kind of puts it out there really quickly in the first paragraph, and I was like, what? Like, really? Are you sure? And then the movie opens up, and the next scene, it's very fast tracking to explain this Palpatine thing, and I was like, oh no, this is not working at all. It was going by so quickly that at one point I was talking with some friends of mine in a spoiler group chat, and they mentioned a line that was said, and I was like, wait, did they actually say that in the movie? It went by so quickly that I missed it. But even if I did catch it, I would still think it was really stupid. And also, I would like to address it in case anyone's going to. I recognize that in the Legacy books that came out a long time ago, when they expanded the lore, they did some stuff with the Emperor coming back. And I'd just like you to know that I also think that that's a really stupid idea. I haven't read those books, and maybe if I read it, I'd go, you know what, that was a pretty good story, but just off of concept alone, and even looking back at the end of Return of the Jedi, I think it's stupid bringing him back. And in this movie, I feel the same way. It was stupid. But I guess out of this entire roster of characters, Rey and Kylo Ren had my favorite story arcs out of any character, even though it was ultimately undercut by Palpatine, I guess. I guess they were my favorite ones. Poe comes a little bit close, mainly just because of Kerry Russell's addition in this movie. They have a little bit of a past with each other, and they had this one scene where they talk, and it was like, okay, that's kind of cool. We're learning a little bit more about Poe, and this, like, hinted relationship, this history, like, okay, that's kind of neat, and they're talking about some things personally, but that goes by a little bit too quickly, though. Like, that's the thing about this movie, and introducing new characters, whether it's Lando coming back, or we have to introduce this new character that's going to be helping us out, is that it all feels like it's going by way too quickly for you to actually feel like you're living with the situation, or that you're actually getting invested with it. The Kerry Russell Poe stuff is where it gets just a little bit close of getting above that. But even then, Poe starts to feel doubts about something that maybe should have been emphasized a little bit more earlier on in the film, instead of just flinging it onto us at the beginning of the third act, where his feelings will just get resolved in like the next 20 minutes or so you don't really feel that much of an impact. And thinking back on it, there is a way that maybe they could have emphasized this point a little bit more so that you really get a big impact with Poe's thing, but it could have potentially meant messing with what they were going to do with the Leia character. And you can kind of tell that they are kind of structuring her sequences specifically around the footage that they just had left over from The Force Awakens. It's something that is very obvious. It's not going to be like, whoa, this is so amazing what they're doing. It's very obvious that it is leftover footage, but I'm not going to knock them for it. They did the best that they could, and they did a very respectable job. I was glad that they didn't do a CGI Leia and just someone came in and did her voice. It was like, I'm so happy they didn't do that, because I think that would have been disrespectful. I'm glad with how they treated her, even if it did come at the cost of weakening the film just by a little bit. Because they could have gone in a different direction because of Carrie Fisher's untimely passing. It's still very sad today, but they decided to honor and respect her. So I can't even knock the movie for trying to be respectful to this legendary woman. I thought they did a good job. But that's the thing about how they utilized Leia in this movie too, is that they could have probably restructured everything else and still had her kind of fit in too. Because I'm just going to be honest, the story is a little weak here as far as they're just looking for a MacGuffin in this one place, and it goes by so quickly. There's some action going on, they have to go to another place, then it goes by a little bit too quickly, don't feel like you're properly living there, but then some action happens, they gotta go somewhere else, and it's just a little repetitive, and it goes by so quickly that you don't feel like you're living in these worlds. Like, whenever they go to another planet on their adventures in these Star Wars movies, you at least feel like you're there enough and you're with these characters, but the movie's pace is so quick that it just feels like it's breezing by. And that's something that I thought J.J. Abrams did very well with The Force Awakens. He crafted a very fast-paced but fun and immersive Star Wars film with that movie. Unfortunately, that same magic wasn't brought back for this one. It does have some fun action sequences, though. Some of them feel like they're cut off a little bit too short. It doesn't feel like maybe top-tier Abrams, but there's a couple lightsaber fights, in particular Rey and Kylo Ren aboard the Death Star wreckage in like these crashing waves. Like, that looks really good, and it's so well directed. You can feel the emotion there. Dan Mendel, the cinematographer, captured some really excellent shots. And of course, the obvious stuff when it comes to liking Star Wars movies, the visual effects, costume design, set design, all these technical elements are all really working here. And also another fantastic score by John Williams, the final John Williams Star Wars score that we are going to be getting. What a way to end his amazing career with these movies. He really came up with some really great compositions for this final installment, and no matter how I feel about this movie, his scores are always going to hold a great place in my heart. Love you, John. But it can have some fun action moments, it can have a lot of technically impressive stuff, but when the plot is as thin as it is and a little bit too repetitive, what you really need to emphasize more on are these characters, and unfortunately, the characterization in this movie I just thought was really weak. I did mention Kylo and Ren and Rey were my favorites out of them, and Poe comes a little bit close, but as I mentioned before, they kind of wait too long to give him an internal conflict. There's this hyped up thing about his bromance with Finn, and it's there for a bit. Like, you can tell they have a good back and forth, but as far as Finn as a character, at this point he kind of feels like dead weight and doesn't really have that much going on other than he's just kind of helping out, yelling out people's names. And they try to create like a running gag with him, something that they established in The Force Awakens and carried over through Last Jedi. And I thought it was going to be a running gag because they brought it up once, and then they brought it up again for a second time. I was like, oh, is this going to be brought up again later and later, and then they're going to have a sense of conclusion, finality with it? And instead, they just drop it. And this thing that they've established in The Force Awakens, J.J. Abrams did, and then carried over in The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson didn't mess with it. J.J. Abrams just decided, we're just going to drop it and not worry about that at all. So it's almost like, you're retconning a lot of stuff with Rey and Kylo Ren, but you're not going to even finish this thing that you personally set up. Like, that's a really bizarre choice. And they decide to introduce this character, Janna, who relates to Finn in some way that I won't give away. But honestly, even if I told you, you'd probably think for a moment, like, oh my gosh, what are they going to do with this development? How are they going to improve his characters? They're just going to ride horses together and shoot things together. And that's kind of it. Janna, I thought, was a really weak newcomer character. And it's another problem of things are going by so quickly that you can't feel like you're living with these people, and the fact that it just feels like they don't know really what to do with Finn anymore. There's a moment in The Last Jedi where they could have killed him off, and honestly I'm thinking back to it, and maybe they just should have let him. That way we can have maybe Rose join them in this movie, and maybe get some more stuff out of her, because I'm just going to be honest, J.J. Abrams said at like Star Wars Celebration that he really loves Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi, but in particular he loves how he gave her Rose because she's such a good character. She doesn't do anything in this movie. That kiss that she and Finn had at the end doesn't get brought up ever again. She doesn't go on another adventure with them. And despite her working in maintenance at the beginning of The Last Jedi, I guess she got promoted off screen to like a high-ranking general. She's barely in this movie, and you might even forget that she's here. And I tried to think like, okay, what if I was just watching this movie? I have no attachment to The Last Jedi. I have no idea who Rose, Finn, or any of these guys are. Let's just watch The Rise of Skywalker. Is Rose like a suitable supporting character? And even then, if you were trying to separate those other films, just watch The Rise of Skywalker. There's no introduction as far as who Rose is as a person. You just kind of see her pop up, and I was thinking to myself, if I was a new viewer who was just watching this, I wouldn't really know what her character is other than she's tight with Finn, I guess? So not only did they drop this one thing that they set up in The Force Awakens Last Jedi, not only did they not do a whole lot with this Janna Finn thing either, but they also dropped the Finn and Rose thing. So really, I just don't see why Finn has to be in this movie. Maybe they could have killed him off at the end of Last Jedi, had Rose come in and be a bigger player and give her more character development, because we could use more Rose. Why not? I liked her in The Last Jedi, except for the last line she says at the end of her scene in Last Jedi. But instead, he's just kind of around. When Lando is reintroduced into this movie, it's so quick, and he's just there to give quick information for the characters to go on another mission, and then he sits out for a long period of time, only to come in later near the film to fly the Falcon with Chewie. And I just thought, man, this is a legacy character, a pretty famous character that it just feels like he could have been any, like, elder new character. Like, it feels like you didn't really need Lando, just, well, people have been asking for Lando and we've waited too long, so here, give him a role. And the last line he says in the movie towards a specific character, I won't spoil it, but it's so awkward, and I was thinking, like, what exactly are you implying? This is bizarre. They introduce a new cutesy droid named D.O., it's funny because it's voiced by J.J. Abrams, and he has a couple of funny things in there, but overall, for the longest time, you're just thinking BB-8 activated this little droid just to have another droid in here that will sell toys. Eventually, they reveal, okay, this was the purpose of it, but I was thinking back, like, you only gave him, like, 3 minor moments, not, like, steal the show moments like BB-8 has always been, just minor moments of, like, small comedy, not even big comedy. Like, the comedy is even weaker in this movie. So if you're going to make this droid slightly more important for how they're going to come to a thing near the end, then maybe you should have been emphasizing him as a droid character more throughout since his introduction, instead of just, okay, he's activated, and you're gonna forget he's here, gonna forget he's here, gonna forget he's here, there he is, forget he's here, forget he's here, forget he's here, there he is again, forget he's here, forget he's here, forget he's here, there he is, and forget he's here, he has info. It just felt very clumsily structured, and I think more than any other Star Wars film, it just felt so obvious that they were just trying to plug a new toy that they had. I like the natural progression of General Hux's character in this. I can't tell you what it is, but I like what they did. It's very short-lived once again, though. And there's another officer that's working with him, General Allegiant Pride, I believe is his official title, played by Richard E. Grant, and he's a great actor. I loved him in Can You Ever Forgive Me? He was so good in that. But in this movie, his character is just so cold and just so stern and has a permanent frown on his face that you barely really get attached to his character. Like, at least Hux has something to get attached to. I've always liked Hux, and I liked his humor in The Last Jedi, and in this one, Pride was just a lame officer to me. And they even reveal something about his character very quickly that I was like, wait, what are you implying? Like, what is the relationship here? What are you implying with him saying that, like, why? It also doesn't help that he's not a character that we've been with that is now rising in the ranks to match General Hux or even be above him. It's just, well, now we have a new character. Oh, speaking of old characters, the Knights of Ren, who were established in The Force Awakens, Rian Johnson made them sound more interesting in The Last Jedi when they revealed Kylo Ren slaughtered a bunch of my students and then took the others and trained them to be the Knights of Ren. I was like, that sounds like a really cool idea. So they're like Padawans that, like, can somewhat use the Force. So I was really excited to see what the Knights of Ren could do in this, especially since J.J. Abrams is the one who included them in The Force Awakens to begin with. But instead, they barely make an impact. They follow Kylo Ren in the hallway. Then there's one scene, their big scene, where they ain't shit. That's the best way to describe them. They ain't shit. Maybe instead of Kylo Ren conveniently showing up at places that Rey and Finn and Poe are at, it's just so he can be like, Rey, I know you're there, we're gonna talk for a bit, and maybe have like a mini battle before you run away. Maybe you could have just had a character in the Knights of Ren, not Kylo Ren, but a character in that group to be following them around. Maybe we could focus more on them, or show off how skilled they are, how intimidating they can be. They didn't do anything, and I thought J.J. Abrams is the one who established them. I thought he'd have a field day with them in this movie, but I guess not. It could make it a little bit more interesting if maybe they had doubts about Ren beforehand, if they questioned him and he allowed them to, if they had if it felt like there was some connection there, if they feared him, or they were growing tired of him, or something. They don't have anything. And they're supposed to be like ex-Jedi Padawans, but they don't do anything! I wanted to mention this real quick. The emotional moment in that trailer where C-3PO's like, taking one last look, sir, at my friends. It's like, that is not as emotional in the movie as it is in that trailer. Like, these characters have really never showed any signs of liking C-3PO, actually, which I can understand because he's always talking, doesn't really know when to shut up. I can kind of buy it, but there's no moment where they're like, we appreciate you, C-3PO, or thanks for helping out. So when it comes down to he's saying this line, you don't feel like any of the characters actually care about that. They didn't even really care before. And even after he says this line, don't think it's because he's about to die. It's just for a running gag that eventually gets resolved, so it might as well have been nothing the whole time. It didn't affect any character, and as much as C-3PO is funny, Anthony Daniels does a good job playing him, It's just one of those things that I was like, why is this a thing that you're doing that feels so clumsy in this script? And it's something that I could blame J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio for, this script, because they wrote it, and Chris Terrio wrote Batman v Superman and Justice League. We can blame him for it, but really I think this is just an overall problem with how Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy approached making the sequel trilogy from the very beginning. They were just like, well, we need to make Star Wars movies immediately, we'll honor the original trilogy by having 3 different directors tackle it, but for some reason they didn't want to get a guy to oversee where the story was going to go, craft the story from the beginning, and then just let these 3 separate filmmakers make their own version of that. Instead, they were just like, J.J. Abrams, you do the first one. Now, Rian Johnson, we're going to trust you completely to carry it where it needs to go, and then Colin, you'll do it. Colin Trevorrow dropped out. They got J.J. Abrams to come in and do it, and since he was like, well, I set up some things with The Force Awakens that I kind of want to do with this one, and plus, not too many people really like The Last Jedi, and Disney is maybe, allegedly, pushing me to retcon some things in The Last Jedi to make fans happy, servicing the fans. I might as well do some of this stuff, but instead they went with like really stupid ideas like Palpatine and retconning very, very cool things that Rian Johnson did. Despite me being more towards The Last Jedi now, I respect that movie a lot for what it tried to do. This movie isn't really trying to do anything, it's just doing stuff for the sake of doing stuff and pleasing fans, and this movie has lost a lot of the Star Wars magic, yet at the same time has a lot of cool Star Wars moments. Like, there's a couple times, I'll admit, I got a little emotional. There's a couple times where the movie made me smile because I was like, oh, I just feel so happy. And the ending, the last 2 minutes of the movie, very good. They handled that very respectfully, very well. I thought they closed off this trilogy very sincerely. But I just can't get swept up in the schmaltziness of a lot of the emotional stuff that they aim for and kind of achieve at, because there's just so many problems plaguing this movie, and it just doesn't feel like a proper conclusion to not just this original trilogy, but the Skywalker saga as a whole. I got more of a sense of finality in The Last Jedi than I did in this movie, because they randomly do this Palpatine thing just so they can get their Emperor Snoke back, just not Snoke anymore, so screw it, I guess it's Palpatine. They're retconning like the mystery of Rey's parents. There actually is still a mystery to unfold here, and Kylo Ren, what's gonna go on with him? There's probably a lot more that I could talk about with this movie, because there's a lot of things that I did like overall. There's a lot of obvious technical things like direction, cinematography, visual effects, and some fun action moments, and no actor is phoning it in. There's no moment where I thought the actors are just, they're tired of it, even though it kind of seems obvious to me that they're really tired of the fandom, but you don't see it in the performances. Like, everyone is there to play their part and they do it fairly well, but the script doesn't give them much to work with in this one especially. Like, The Last Jedi gave them all much more better things to work with as opposed to this one, which just felt sloppily handled. There's some cool ideas in there, but then it's plagued by this really bad idea that you went with and no one stopped you, and I don't know why. After the first 5 minutes of the movie, after I saw how choppy it was kind of edited together, and how they inserted stuff very quickly, I was just kind of like, man, this movie is not gonna go the way I think. But not in the same way of The Last Jedi, where it went in a different direction, but for the better for most of it. It went into a different direction that just led to complete suckage. I'm gonna give Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker a C. I can't hate this movie. I can't go lower than a C because of those things that I mentioned before that I liked. But I can't go higher than a C either because there's a lot of problems plaguing this movie, whether it's underdeveloped things, undercut emotional and character arcs that don't even really feel like arcs because they just randomly fling it in there, or arcs that feel really good until Palpatine. I hinted at it before, but Palpatine does something in the beginning 5 minutes that later affects the third act battle, and I was just thinking, like, what the... Are you kidding me? You're just gonna throw that in? Why? What is this? What is going on? And then that third act battle I couldn't take seriously because there's just... It's going by so quickly, you kind of don't really get a sense of like, okay, is anyone really winning here? Like, okay, I guess someone's winning here. Oh, no, losing now? Oh no, they're gonna... I don't know. I don't even really care all that much. Some good ideas can't really save overall how mediocre the storytelling was in this movie, and as someone who really respects J.J. Abrams as a filmmaker, this is easily his weakest film in my eyes. And although I don't think this is the worst Star Wars movie, it comes very close. It's in my bottom, like, 4 as far as my Star Wars rankings go. Phantom Menace lowest, then Attack of the Clones above it, Clone Wars the movie, and then this. But if you've seen Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, leave in the comments below what you thought of it. Like I said, there's probably a lot more that I could mention that I'm not here, but leave your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.